Hello, and thank you for tuning in to Starting Small. Today, I'm joined by Ashley Gould of Âme Atendre. Ashley, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so to kick things off, as you know, I'd like to start out just taking it back to your upbringing. Where did you grow up, and what would you say your childhood was like?
So I grew up in the Bay Area in California. I was actually born in San Francisco, and grew up between Marin County and San Francisco. And I had a wonderful childhood. I have three sisters, and I was very into sports and school, I would say, were the two things that I was into
Mm,
as a child and family, always family. Um, and my parents were divorced when I was 3 years old. So my dad was in the city and my mom remarried and was in Marin County.
mm,
And I think for me, just from a young age, I was very cognizant that I always wanted to be able to take care of myself financially.
yeah.
And my dad was wonderful and always around and extremely supportive, but I was cognizant that it might not have worked out that way. So
Mm.
it just gave me, I would say, a focus on education and being able to support myself as an adult.
Yeah, so, growing up, what did that look like for you? You said at 3 years old, so what did you look for guidance and some of that leadership? Was it your father? Were you going to your mom? What did that look like?
Well, and my mom was remarried when I was very young as well. I think I was maybe 4 or 5.
Mhm.
And my stepfather still has a huge role in my life. And then my father was remarried when I was in high school, and my stepmother, we don't like to use that word, but
Yeah.
but she also is still a huge role in my life. So I had extremely supportive parents. My parents were very focused on education, and also just supporting whatever we were interested in. I do think, and I have all sisters,
Mm,
um, that I wish there had been more of a focus on like a financial path. I ended up going to law school. I wish I'd done like a JD MBA,
mm.
but it was not something that was sort of focused on. And both, I should mention, both my father and my stepfather are both lawyers, so those were
Wow.
sort of my role models, and probably why I first went into that field.
Yeah. So, before we get into that, you have a very interesting background, but growing up, were you into any athletics or sports, or was entrepreneurship in your ecosystem growing up? What was that like?
I was very into sports from a pretty young age. In fact, when I was in grade school, they didn't have a girls' soccer team, so I played on the boys' soccer team. And I played soccer and tennis in high school, and then I started running. And I actually remember hearing in an earlier episode you were into running, and your dad was into running. I used to
Yeah.
run marathons, which I started in college,
Wow.
and that was an amazing experience. And I think all of these things. Then I got into CrossFit. So I've always kind of been into sports. And I am a big believer that team sports are super important and helpful in a business setting, and
Mm,
just learning how to be part of a team and learning, how teams operate. So I
yeah.
think, and also, and you know this from running can be a very mental sport.
Yeah.
So being able to run for hours and to go long distances, you really have to dig deep mentally as well as physically. And I think that's also
Mm,
really important training for professional endeavors. Um, and so I didn't have, I have, my older sisters are identical twins actually, and they had like bracelet making businesses and little things like that. I never was into that, but I was from a very young age very interested and aware of money. So like there'd be a billboard that would say like, this public sector job is, $40,000 a year. And I would ask my dad, is that a lot of money? And he would say, yeah, that's a lot of money. And I would say, but no, but for a year, is that a lot of money? So I was from a
yeah.
young age, like very interested in what does it actually mean? Not
Mm,
just, is this a big number, but like, what does it mean for your life? And I think
yeah,
that that has definitely helped throughout my life.
for sure. So obviously you mentioned some family members had inspiration on kind of your law background, but then you ended up going to California, Berkeley. What kind of led you into that route, especially the interest in law and going to that school in the first place?
Well, I grew up in the Bay Area and I went to a private high school in San Francisco and a lot of kids in my class went to schools all over the country to small private schools. And my parents and I have, I was in a big family and my parents were like, you can go to any UC school you want, but you are going to a state school.
Yeah.
So I went and I visited a lot of the UC schools and and I just really liked Berkeley. It's funny because I was in Marin in San Francisco, but I never really had spent time in the East Bay before then. And from my perspective, and this is kind of how it turned out, like you could be very
Mhm.
close to home and it could be as close or as far as you want it to be. So I would come home and do laundry. I actually was taking advanced math classes and I would come home and use our computer because at the time, and I'm dating myself, but at the time, the computer labs that you would have to go to on campus didn't have enough computing power. So
Yeah,
it was a benefit to be close and also, an entirely new and different world for me.
for sure. So, with your time there, what were some of your aspirations? Was it to stay in the state as well once you went to school there, or what was the big dream going to school here at this time for you?
So that's a great question. I feel like I was just very focused on getting a good education and I didn't know going into college what I wanted to do. But one thing I did know is that I loved the French language and that I wanted to spend a year abroad. So I spent my junior year of college in Grenoble, which is a mountain town about 3 hours south by train of Paris. And I
Mm,
also always loved to ski, so I brought my skis with me. And and that was an amazing experience that I highly recommend to everybody. And I have two children, and will highly encourage them to do the same. I just think it's really important to see how other people live and
mm,
what their culture is like and how they spend their time. And in the United States, we are very focused on work ethic. We work a lot. In France, what I saw was that people were enjoying their lives more.
mhm,
They were still working hard, but they had a more natural separation and they understood sort of innately the importance of family and friends and just spending time. And also, I would say beautiful things, which all kind
mm.
of led me eventually to my company.
Yeah, love it. So, diving into post graduation here. So, I know you've had numerous really incredible roles, really notable companies as well. What was the first segue, would you say, outside of post graduation that kind of sparked your journey, your career journey? What was that role, do you think, that really curved your growth?
So I honestly think that they have all been instrumental and sort of built on each other. So I went to law school after I graduated from college and I started my career at a big firm in the Silicon Valley and I did a lot of really big initial public offerings and debt transactions and equity transactions um, and I learned a lot about how companies operate and I
Mhm,
think actually, really interestingly, I learned a lot about this might sound silly, but cap tables or capitalization tables. So I understood um, how equity works, what is
mm,
preferred stock, what is common stock, what is dilution. And these are all things that I think have helped me immensely throughout my
yeah,
life. And it really started being a very junior associate, having to keep the cap table and really understanding what it means when somebody invests money or their time and they get equity in a
mm,
company, what that can turn into.
yeah,
Um, and I also saw small deals and big deals. I saw companies do well. I saw companies implode. And I got to work with a lot of executive teams and boards.
mm,
And I think that, just being exposed to different things is incredibly helpful.
yeah,
And I realized after about 5 years that it was, I was like sleeping 2 hours on the floor kind of thing. It was not sustainable.
mm,
I was working extremely, extremely long hours,
yeah,
and I had decided I wanted to go in-house somewhere. And in that period, my father was diagnosed with a very rare cancer, and I
mm.
decided I wanted to go into the life sciences initially, which is what I did.
Wow. Yeah, let's get into there's a couple notable spots here. So 23andMe, I would like to dive in that a little bit. So
Yeah.
you had to have been an early player at the company at that time. What was the state of the company when you joined? I think maybe a year or two since
Yeah.
launch? What was that?
I was either the 12th or the 14th employee. So I was a
Wow.
very early employee. I remember actually we were in this temporary space and we didn't even have an IT department, but one of our computer programmers like hands me a computer and he's like, okay, here you go. And I'm sharing an office with somebody, which I had never done before. And I'm like, I have no idea what I'm doing. And just to set up my computer, I had always been at companies where IT would take care of that for you. So it was very scrappy. It was before we had launched and
Wow.
it was so much fun. And I joined the company because I really felt like, and I still feel like it is an amazing platform for rare disease research. And my father had a rare cancer.
Yeah.
Um, Little did I know that it would become sort of like a hotbed issue on your right to get your genetic information directly, and I actually ended up testifying before Congress. I mean, it
Wow.
was a wild experience. Yeah.
I believe it. No, what did that look like growth wise for you? Because I know you were there for a certain amount of time. You became chief legal officer there at the team. At the full state of your time at the company, what did that reach? Team size, and you can
We
touch on
were,
that.
I don't know if I can remember how big we were. I mean, we grew a lot.
Yeah.
We had our own huge office. I mean, I don't know if we were probably hundreds of people, not thousands. I know it's grown since, and now
Yep.
they're probably doing a bit of downsizing, but we obviously had very clear distinctions between groups. When I left, when I started,
Mhm.
we all wore multiple hats.
Yeah.
So it grew, I mean, it grew substantially while I was there.
Yeah. No, for sure. I think a big part about your journey and career is like really resilience, and a lot of a lot of stabs can come your way. You mentioned the Congress, and then also I know eventually you got into JUUL as well. I would love to touch on that.
Yeah.
How was that role in comparison to your previous ventures before? Because I know there had to have been a lot of targets on your guys' back at that time.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, I ended up at JUUL because I went to several companies after I left 23andMe. I went back into the healthcare space in small public companies, and they all were bought.
Mm,
And so I was thinking about sort of my next role, and everybody wanted to keep offering me a chief legal officer role at public companies. And I was really interested in broadening my experience. So when JUUL reached out to me initially, I was like, not interested. I don't smoke. I don't believe in smoking. And the CFO just said, come in and meet with the founders, hear their story. And I was so captivated by their story and then did a bunch of research. And still to this day, I really, really believe that JUUL and e-cigarettes or vaping is when well manufactured, much safer for addicted smokers than
mm,
smoking cigarettes. And
yeah.
my whole focus, ever since my father was diagnosed with cancer, was in helping people. And I felt like, well, this is an amazing platform. I could help so many more people. Little did I know, again, like with 23andMe, you know, we never thought about all of the issues that would come up. And the same thing happened at JUUL. Obviously, terrible that kids were using the product.
Mm,
Um, and I think the company was extremely misunderstood. But that company, we were like 100 people when I joined the company, and it was thousands of people when I
wow.
left. So the growth was very large. I also testified before Congress while at JUUL. So
Wow.
I wore like a number of different hats while I was there as well. And that really ties like directly into why I started Âme Atendre,
Yeah.
which is really focused on, like, I saw the polarization in that issue. I felt
Mm,
it personally, but I also saw it on a societal level. Then we went into COVID, and so everybody sort of was not spending time physically together. And then we've had so many issues that polarize us as a society,
mm,
um, you know, all across the board, like politically, culturally. And I just feel like we need to be able to learn to disagree respectfully
Yeah.
have hard conversations, but we also need human connection. Like we really fundamentally need that. And so Âme Atendre is really focused on creating beautiful, well-designed and crafted objects that enable us to spend time together and to hopefully
Mm,
connect on a deeper level.
love it. So you mentioned COVID there, and I know Amaton is right around the peak of COVID. So when did the idea of Amaton come when you wanted to launch? And was COVID a scare during that time? What did the supply chain look like for your product? I'd love to hear that point of view.
Yeah. So we actually launched after, I mean, post COVID, right?
Yeah.
So it was really during COVID that I was really thinking about like, what do I want to do next? And I also moved, my family moved during COVID from California to Park City, Utah, which is where I live now.
Mm,
So there was, a lot of moving pieces. And I eventually came to this place where I felt like, okay, my mom growing up laid a beautiful table. She was a wonderful hostess. And it wasn't just about a beautiful table. It was also about the feeling of having people come into our house and feel welcome and sharing time and food together. So I took all of that. She also had a stationery and small gift shop when I was growing up. And then everything that I had been dealing with in the world and all of this polarization and thinking about like how can I combine these things, and decided that what I really wanted to do was to create these beautiful objects. So
mm,
the first part of that was, how am I going to design these things? I don't have that background. And then
yeah.
how am I going to produce them? So
Yeah.
it was, years honestly of work. And you talk about this in a lot of your episodes. There's like a lot of ups and downs.
Yeah.
Um, so I met Dylan Williamson, who is the designer who works with me, is amazing. Went to the Rhode Island School of Design, and together we have really designed these amazing objects that are beautiful and practical for today. So everything can go in the
Mm,
dishwasher, everything can go in the microwave. It's also really thoughtful in like, how do you pick it up? How do you move it? How do you store it?
yeah.
Um, so then we had to find vendors, and we're working with small vendors. It's, our ceramics, and I know you have some of our ceramics,
Yeah.
are hand thrown in Utah. So everything is kind of small batch and very thoughtfully done.
Mm,
And so we went first to Mexico and met some people there. None of that worked out. Then we went to this amazing show called Maison Objet in Paris. And we actually met some amazing vendors who we do still work with today.
mm,
And like anything in business, some things work out and some things don't.
yeah.
And so we moved into prototyping. Some of the quality was not to our standards, so we're not working with those vendors. Some vendors are more difficult to work with from a communications perspective. So,
Mm,
it's been a process and it's a journey.
yeah.
Um, and so it took us probably a year and a half, to get our website up and running. And, so that's a huge accomplishment. And
Yeah, for sure.
we have to celebrate the accomplishments along the way.
Exactly. So with all the ups and downs with finding vendors, is it so to explain the supply chain? So Dylan and yourself, you do a lot of the designing and the design work of what products you want, what they might look like, and then you find vendors. So you have a number of vendors right now. How does that look right now?
Absolutely. Yeah. So
Mhm.
for example, we met a company called Klimchi, and the owner, Lukasz, we met at Maison Objet in Paris. We spent, they have their own products, but we said, can you create our product for us? So we've
Mm,
created these beautiful cocktail glasses. Well, in the United States, the way that we think about a cocktail glass is very different from how they think about one in Europe. So ours are heavy. They have what they call ice on the bottom, which is just more crystal, which gives it heft. So we had to come
mm,
up with we came up with our entirely new design, and then they had to produce it, and it took several tries because they're all hand blown. And so that's like, it's a beautiful collaboration um, that we have with them, and they make their crystal in these beautiful colors. Uh, and that relationship works so beautifully because we can say, look, this is what we don't like about the prototype. Can we change it? And they will say
yeah.
yes. And other vendors are not as interested in working with us, to perfect what we're looking for in our market.
Yeah.
So we have We have another amazing vendor, Hector Sachs in Paris, family run factory. All of their goods are handmade. So we have these beautiful one of a kind backgammon sets that are
Mm,
literally handmade. And we have these amazing colors because each piece is one of a kind. And we actually
wow.
got to visit the factory in Paris. So we're building these relationships with these small vendors. And now our focus is, okay, people need to get to know why this is so expensive. Why is it so special?
Yeah.
Right. And how can it improve their lives? And I personally believe that objects improve our life and
Mm,
that a beautiful object that you interact with on a daily basis can actually make your day better.
yeah. That's amazing. And I mean, just feeling and seeing the product firsthand, you're so right. It's just they're beautiful, they feel clean. And when you go to the site as well, I mean, all the other products, that's the beauty of Âme Atendre is that they all differ. It doesn't look so custom across this site. That's what I really like about it. Um, once you find a vendor and then they create the product that you desire, what does inventory look like? So do you guys purchase an X amount? You hold inventory in a house? What does that look like?
Yeah, so we do hold inventory, but small amounts. So all of our products are small batch products. They're predominantly handmade.
Hmm.
So, we're ordering in the hundreds, not in the thousands,
Yeah.
which right now is fine and hopefully will be an issue that I need to address in the
Yeah.
future because so many of our vendors are outside of the United States. And so we have to take into account one, their own, you know, cultures, like in Paris, in France, and in Italy, they take a lot of time off in the summer, for example, so that they don't
Yeah.
work in the same way we do. So we have to think about like when do we need to order? How long do we need to take for things to, be sent? Are we shipping by air or sea because the pricing is very different? All of those things we need to take into account.
Mm,
Um, and so that's something we'll have to continue to work with as we grow.
yeah. Looking at the site today, what would you say is your audience, the main demographic? You mentioned it's a premium product, but there is a difference in look, feel, and just the way the overall product is crafted. It's
Yeah.
handmade. What would you say is that audience overall?
I think that it is, and we're still collecting data on this, but currently my best guess is that it's predominantly women, sort of in I would say like late 30s to 60s age
Yeah.
range. Um, and, that have to be doing relatively well to spend money on these kinds of things. But I also believe that well-made things last.
Yeah.
So we have, for example, this wooden cutting board that's actually made in Indiana, um,
Wow.
and it's our own design. We have cutouts on the bottom. It's beautiful. It's very sturdy. It's made of beautiful red oak, and if you take care of it, it should last you decades.
Mm,
Whereas if order something that's not so expensive, you're probably throwing it away in a year. So
yeah.
I've always been a big believer in like fewer, better things.
Yeah.
But people need to buy into that. And I think they have to also have the trust that these products are well made and will last them.
Mm, for sure. Looking at the site today, so you guys are 100% direct consumer. Is that correct? And would there be a plan of retail rollout, or does it just make sense for you guys 100% D2C right now, e-commerce?
So we are currently just e-commerce. However, we are in the process of exploring working with trade,
Mm,
and specifically interior designers. So we are going to a show. Um, it's called a design pop-up. It's in Denver in June. They actually have them all over the country. And it's meant for, so you have to apply to go to the show. It's a relatively small number of people that they choose, and then it's meant for designers. So designers
mm,
walk through, they get to meet with each business that's there. And we think that that's going to be actually a great channel for us because designers really, they have a specific aesthetic, so they can look at our site, look at our products and see if that fits their aesthetic.
yeah.
And then they also like to have things that not everybody has. And the thing that's beautiful about Âme Atendre is that our products are not products other people have because we design and create them ourselves. And I
Yeah.
do think people are looking for that more and more. People don't want to walk in and see the same thing in every house.
Yeah.
And so we think that that's going to be a great channel for us. So that's something we're
Mm,
exploring. We are open to wholesale in retail, and we've had a few select conversations so far. Um, but that is really hard from a margin perspective
yeah.
to make money. And we do want to build a sustainable business. So I'm open to that for sure for like the right retail environment. And that I think would be more for brand awareness
Yeah.
than for revenue generation.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. Looking at for the listeners listening here, so when Dylan and yourself comes up with a design, what does that R&D process look like? So you you discover a product you might want to make, so maybe a mug or a plate. You design that. What does that look like? Then to find a vendor who would fit that design that you're desiring.
Yeah, it's a great question. So I'll just take our mug as an example. So
Yep.
Dylan is in their 20s and I will be 50 this month. So it's very, very helpful to have like different age ranges, like
Mm,
focusing on product development. And I know what I want in a product, and Dylan knows what they think is helpful or would like in a product. So our mug, for example, I was very focused on how it feels in the hand, how much liquid you can put in it. Absolutely needs to be able to go in the microwave because I reheat my coffee all the time.
yeah.
Also needs to be dishwasher safe. And I didn't want a form that everybody has. I wanted it to be something you can pick up, easily and put your thumb on very comfortably.
Mm,
We actually just recently sort of tallied the number of hours it took us to develop that mug, and it is around 400 hours.
wow.
So it's a
Wow.
process where it's a very time consuming process. And, you also have to prototype, and that's part of what takes so much time. So you think that this handle is going to work, and then you get it back, and it doesn't feel the way you want it to feel in your hand. So then
Mm,
you have to go back to the drawing board and do it again in CAD and then send it to your vendor. And in this case, we're having them hand thrown. Even for the hand throwing, they have to wait. They make the body of the mug. It has to sit for 3 days before they attach the handle and before it can
wow.
go in the kiln. So it's a
Wow.
very involved process.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm so delighted with the outcome. I mean, to me, it is so worthwhile. I absolutely love in the morning picking up my mug and getting my coffee. It's just
Love it.
a beautiful experience. And I think that people should try it. It's funny, for many, many years, I didn't spend a lot of money on my everyday things. And when I
Mm,
got married, I have all these beautiful things that I got for my wedding, and I never use them
mm.
because I can't put them in the dishwasher and they're too hard to take care of or they're too
Ah,
fragile. So, this idea of like elevated every day, I really would encourage people to try, and just try it with one thing. Try it with your mug in the morning
mm,
or your water glass or whatever it is, and see if it makes a difference for you.
love it. Looking at the site today and kind of the data that you have so far, what would you say is the top seller product wise, if you can depict that?
Yeah, it actually probably is our mug.
Yeah.
And I think it may be because it is different. And sometimes and you don't need to buy so many of them. So even though it's more expensive than what you would buy, you could get one or two, try it out, and then decide if you want to get more.
Yeah.
And then also our water glasses, which are very like a unique shape. So they're pretty lightweight compared to a typical water glass. And we made them like this beautiful shape so you can hold it easily in your hand, and they stack really nicely. And
Mm,
I use it, beside my bed every evening, but also in the morning for juice or water or what have you. And I think that's another thing that people are drawn to. We also designed that with a carafe so that the water glass sits on top of the carafe beautifully.
oh, wow.
So just some like thoughtful elements that I think
Mhm.
people appreciate.
Incredible. Taking the listener on the experience, the customer experience, what does that look like? Once they go on the site, they shop for their product, say they choose one. So what does that process look like for you guys as well from the back end? Is it you guys packing inventory, sending it to the customer yourself? What kind of paint that picture?
Yeah. So it's a very seamless, just, direct to consumer process. You just go on the website, you put your item in the cart. Right now we have 10% off if you want to join our email list.
Hmm.
And then and then, we get the order here. I'm actually sitting in our warehouse right now.
Nice.
And then we do the fulfillment here. I'm doing a lot of the fulfillment myself, which I think is really helpful to just figure out what works best. We're also really trying to use sustainable materials, so we're not using any plastic in our
Mm,
shipping. And we actually, the newest thing that we just added to our website, which took like 2 years to find somebody to produce our note cards. So I said my mom had a stationery store, and I am
mm,
a big believer in writing handwritten notes.
yeah.
Um, so we just put on our website boxes of note cards, and so we include one note card with every order with a stamp and encourage people to send that out. And
Wow.
I write, we'll see whether this is scalable, but I write
Yeah.
like a handwritten note to everybody, so that they can hopefully feel like we really appreciate them investing in a more expensive and thoughtfully made product. And hopefully they feel that when they receive it.
Love it. I love that personal touch. Well, Ashley, we'd like to conclude each episode with this. I mean, such an amazing journey, amazing career journey, and then the founding behind Âme Atendre. I would love to hear if there's one piece of advice you can share with aspiring entrepreneur, maybe something you've learned or regret along the way. What would you say that would be?
Yeah, I mean, gosh, there are so many things. I think one thing is constantly learn and be curious. And curiosity is a big part. Curiosity and respect, I would say, are like two fundamental
Mm,
elements of Âme Atendre. Um, and I listen to, for example, I listen to a lot of podcasts. I listen to your podcast. Every one of your guests has something interesting to say,
yeah.
and their journeys teach us. It's not just the advice at the end; it's the entire journey.
Yeah.
There's so many great ways to get that information today. So whether it's reading books or listening to podcasts, I would say listen to other people's journeys and take
Mm,
what resonates with you, but you also always have to go with your gut. So what's right
yeah.
for one business or person is not going to be right for you. Some of that you're just going to have to learn the hard way. We all make mistakes, and learn from them. As long as we learn from them, it's all good, right?
Mm,
But I would say learn from other people. There are so many wonderful and great people who have come before us. Let's learn from them.
incredible. I love it. Well, Ashley, thank you so much for joining me. And to the listeners out there, make sure to check out Âme Atendre at amatond.com. shop.getbezel.com.